Gilbert Stuart was the greatest portrait painter in America. He'd painted kings, he'd painted aristocrats across Europe. But when he sat down with George Washington in 1793, he saw something that disturbed him. Stuart later told a friend that Washington's features were indicative of the strongest and most ungovernable passions. He said that if Washington had been born in the wilderness, he would have been the fiercest man among the savage tribes. This was the man on the dollar bill, the marble statue, the father of the country. And the painter saw a volcano. What Stuart glimpsed was something Washington had spent 50 years trying to hide. A war he fought every single day, not against the British, against himself. Before George Washington could build a nation, he had to build George Washington. The Washington who appears in textbooks, calm, dignified, silent, did not exist in 1752. That year, a 20-year-old surveyor stomped through the Virginia wilderness with a chip on his shoulder the size of the colony. His father had died when he was 11. His mother criticized him constantly. His older brothers had been sent to England for proper schooling. George got nothing. He was tall, physically powerful, and burning with ambition he could barely contain. A family friend, Colonel William Fairfax, wrote a letter about the young man with a single warning. "I wish I could say that he governs his temper." He couldn't. Washington's rages were legendary among those who knew him young. His face would flush. His hands would shake. One subordinate described watching fury build in him like passion almost too mighty for man. This was not a man born to lead. This was a man who had to remake himself from raw material. Sometime around age 16, Washington copied out 110 rules into a notebook. They came from a French Jesuit manual called The Rules of Civility and Decent Behaviour in Company and Conversation. The rules were obsessively specific. Rule 4. In the presence of others, sing not to yourself with a humming noise, nor drum with your fingers or feet. Rule 12. Bedew no man's face with your spittle by approaching too near him when you speak. To modern ears, this sounds absurd. Etiquette tips for a boy who would cross the Delaware. But Washington wasn't learning manners. He was learning control. Every rule was a restraint. Every restraint was practice. He was training himself to monitor his body, his face, his voice, to place a barrier between impulse and action. He also devoured Seneca, the Stoic philosopher. One passage he underlined: "The contempt of death makes all the miseries of life easy to us." Another: "He is the brave man that can look death in the face without trouble or surprise." Washington was building armor, not against musket balls, against himself. By his 30s, the transformation was visible. The man who couldn't govern his temper had become famous for governing everything. His movements were deliberate. His words were few. He entered rooms and the temperature changed. But those closest to him knew the truth. Thomas Jefferson, who worked alongside Washington for years, wrote that his temper was naturally high-toned, but reflection and resolution had obtained a firm and habitual ascendancy over it. Then Jefferson added a warning. If ever, however, it broke its bonds, he was most tremendous in wrath. John Adams saw the same thing. He had great self-command, Adams admitted, but whenever he lost his temper, as he did sometimes, either love or fear in those about him induced them to conceal his weakness from the world. Gouverneur Morris, one of Washington's closest allies, put it plainly. With him was his first contest, and his first victory was over himself. The calm was not natural. The calm was built. And maintaining it cost him something every single day. That daily practice, the monitoring, the restraint, the rules repeated until they became reflex, was Washington's private discipline. Most people never see that kind of work. It happens in silence. It happens before anyone else is awake. If you want a structured way to build that same discipline into your own mornings, there's an app called Affirmations. Link in the description. Now watch what happened when the weight of that discipline became almost too heavy to carry. December 1777, Valley Forge. Washington's army was starving. 4,000 men had no blankets. Many had no shoes. Their bare feet left bloody streaks in the snow. Soldiers were dying, not from battle, but from typhus, dysentery, and cold. Washington could have raged. He could have blamed Congress, blamed the states, blamed the farmers selling food to the British instead of to his own men. Instead, he wrote a letter. Naked and starving as they are, we cannot enough admire the incomparable patience and fidelity of the soldiery. He slept in a tent while his men built huts, refusing better quarters until they had shelter. He walked among them. He said little, but they saw him. One French officer struggled to describe what Washington projected. Grave, yet not severe. Affable without familiarity. Its predominant expression was calm dignity. The men didn't follow Washington because he gave speeches. They followed him because he was there, every day, carrying weight they couldn't see. March 1783. The war was almost over, and Washington faced his most dangerous moment. His officers were furious. Congress had promised them back pay for years of service. Now, with peace coming, it looked like Congress would simply disband the army and send them home with nothing. Anonymous letters circulated through camp, calling for the officers to refuse to disband, to march on Congress, to take what they were owed by force. A military coup. Against the government Washington had spent 8 years fighting to create. He called a meeting. When he walked into the hall, the room went quiet. These were his men, and they were ready to turn against everything. Washington spoke for several minutes. He asked them to trust Congress. He reminded them of what they had fought for. He appealed to their honor. It wasn't working. He could see it in their faces. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a letter from a congressman, promising that payment would come. He lifted the letter, squinted, stumbled over the first line. The officers watched, confused. Washington reached into his pocket and pulled out something none of them had ever seen him wear. A pair of reading glasses. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "you must pardon me. I have grown grey in your service, and now find myself growing blind." The room broke. Officers began to weep. The mutiny dissolved. not because of an argument, because in that moment they saw the cost. 8 years of war. A man who had given everything. He put on his glasses and saved the Republic. George Washington was not born great. He was born with a temper he could barely control, an ambition that burned too hot, and a hunger that could have consumed him. He built something else, rule by rule, day by day, for 50 years. His first victory was over himself. It was also his last.